up, book lovers? It is G-Swizz here, and we're finally here today to talk about my top 23 books and series of 2023. 2023 is the year I read the most. So on my Goodreads, I'm recording that I read 350 books this year. That is also not including some of the manuscripts I got this year. I would say I read somewhere between 5 to 10 extra books there, but I'm just currently, for the record, saying I read 350 books. This year was a very successful reading year, and I think that 23 books slash series is really hard to select out of a reading total of 350 books. There are so many books I want to talk about today, but I narrowed it down. And I know that making a long list, like a top 20, is not for everyone. I get that, but because I've read so much this year, it's pretty much the least I could do. Like, I could even go into a top 30 if I could. I will also not be mentioning any romantic contemporary on this list today, in the hopes that I might just do a tier ranking video in the future. I would love to do a tier ranking video with romantic contemporaries. That would be so fun. I think I'm also leaving out manga on this list as well. I do want to talk about some manga, but my manga reading this year I don't believe was as good as the manga reading I experienced last year in finding some new favorites. So that is why no manga is on this list specifically. I will specifically be talking about my top 23 books, excluding a specific publisher slash their imprints. Interjection from the future and the editing room. So for the next 5 minutes of this video, I will be discussing a recent controversy within the book community. The book community being the book influencer community and the book publishing community. And the reason why I go on about it for a bit is because it's something that has been weighing on me recently. But if you are wanting to skip to the video, please use the timestamps that I've provided down in the description. Also, I believe it should be on the YouTube bar as well, where I count down in reverse numeric order. Please enjoy the video, but yes, I will be going into the controversy right now. Now, before I proceed with this video, I need to make it very clear that I am not including any books from St. Martin's Press, nor am I including any books from a St. Martin's Press imprint in the US or globally, from what I know. However, if I do while we're going on strike slash boycott, do let me know, because it's really difficult to measure these things, especially because there is no St. Martin's Press here in Australia specifically. I mean, we do have Pan Macmillan, and St. Martin's Press is a division of Pan Macmillan, but not every book from St. Martin's Press in the US stays under the division of St. Martin's Press here in Australia. So I did have a favorite or two that I was going to mention in this video today, but to cut a long story short, I'm currently boycotting St. Martin's Press. You might have noticed that one specific title has been left out of my end of year videos, and I've specifically left it out because in the US it has been published by St. Martin's Press. And you might be wondering, what G-Swizz? What's with this boycott all of a sudden? And to that I would say I'd personally encourage you to check Jess Owen's video out on this. That is how I found out about this, because I'm currently not on Book Talk. I'm on Book Twitter every once in a while, but I literally go on Twitter to look at otter photos because I need positivity in my life. However, as soon as I found out that there was an employee being an unsafe space for Palestinian people who had posted Islamophobic remarks and racist remarks, and who had reposted things that I personally don't stand for, that are hurtful and harmful, that is what made me very uneasy about supporting St. Martin's Press at this time, especially because I am personally waiting for them to address the situation. Alongside the rest of the book community at the moment who are currently in support of Palestine, I'm just gonna say this. I myself come from the Australian Middle Eastern community, and I am a minority in publishing. And honestly, when it comes to employee surveys or suggestions, I am often suggesting that there would be a safer space and representation in my publisher for Middle Eastern voices. I'm just gonna say this. If it was my publisher who had an employee like that, and they didn't address it, I would feel really unsafe, coming from the background that I come from. And I am not saying that the publisher I work for is perfect. I don't think that any publisher at the moment is perfect. However, I would personally appreciate to see publishers taking active steps to making marginalized people feel safe. And considering that this is a marketing employee who would potentially be in active conversation with book reviewers and book influencers, it makes it even more dangerous because Because as a publishing company, you're not only making your marginalized employees feel unsafe, you're making marginalized book reviewers and book influencers feel unsafe working with someone like that. Overall, if you would like the full context as to what has been going on and to learn more about it, I would highly suggest you check out some of the resources that I have down in the description. I've also left a petition for you to sign. I've personally signed it as well. This kind of thing works me up. It makes me really upset. I really just want to see the publishing industry progress. I just think that this is a big low. And if anything, I don't feel comfortable promoting any of St. Martin's Press books on my platform until this gets addressed. We're not specifically boycotting until the employee gets fired. No, we just want to know from St. Martin's Press that going forward, the employee base will feel safe and that they will take action where necessary, but also they can work with members of the Palestinian, Middle Eastern, Arab, and Muslim community to ensure that they are providing a safe space in the book influencer community as well. Because behavior like that, especially when it is well known that they are a publishing employee, I don't think that that's acceptable. It literally says in my employee contract that going forward, after I sign the contract, that I am a representation of the publisher I work for. I'm pretty sure the same would be expected of the St. Martin's Press employee. I could talk about this for a while. This video is not about that, but I believe that if there's any video I need to address it, I think it should be this video right here, where I am talking about my favorite books I read this year. There were a couple of favorite books from this publisher. I do have to specify, yes, I've had to fill those spots. It does not mean I like those books less, and it does not mean I don't support those authors and I won't support them going forward. But I will not be supporting a publishing company who is not punishing the behavior that should be punished. Readers, reviewers, and other members of the publishing industry now sees SMP as either negligent or hurtful themselves. As a publishing employee and as someone who is a part of the Australian Middle Eastern community, I would just be so hypocritical if I sat here promoting SMP books simply because I liked them. When the people of Palestine are deeply hurt and affected right now, this whole situation just makes me feel sick. That's why I do not feel comfortable talking about the titles that I could have been talking about today, and that's on you, SMP. Alright, so I guess without further ado, let's get straight into this top 23 because we have a lot to talk about, and I could gush about these for hours, but we don't have that kind of time, so let's do this. In spot number 23, we have The Adventures of Amina El Sarafi by Shannon Chakraborty. Even though I am a little bit upset that I could not talk about some of the titles that I wanted to talk about on this list today, I am so happy that it left some room to talk about Amina El Sarafi. This book was so fun. It's only low on this list because it's just the beginning of Amina's adventure. It is a little bit slow, but I still really enjoyed it. And I especially love how this book was told narratively. I think that it was really funny sometimes that Amina would just walk away from the mic and pretty much tell people in the background to stop distracting her, or she would talk to people in the background and then she would come back and say, anyway, back to the story. I love how that was told narratively, and I also listened to this one on audiobook, and the audiobook performance was phenomenal. I think that an amazing job was done with this book and with the audiobook in general. It's not a perfect book. I'm so looking forward to the rest of the series. I cannot wait to see where Amina is going to go next. Overall, I still had a really fun time with it. It was a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this one, and I'm really happy I could spotlight this one today. Spot number 22 goes to the Stars and Shadows series by Holly Renee. This was just a perfect comfort read. This book series barely has any plot. It's definitely more suited to those who read romance contemporaries or cozy romance over those who love fantasy romance, even though this is technically a fantasy romance. But I think this fantasy romance specifically fits more into the romance fantasy slash romantasy side of things because there's barely any world building. It just so happens to have a fantastical plot with a little bit of politics, but those politics aren't really focused on. It's the relationships between the characters that are really focused on. I still really enjoyed it. I think overall this series was a delight to read, and it is one that I will definitely go back to when I'm looking for something that is comforting and won't take too much brain power to focus on. And in spot number 21, we have The Zodiac Wolves by Elizabeth Briggs. I really loved this. I was so compelled in the story. It actually initially was higher on this list, but I had to do some reevaluation because this series was just so entertaining, but I did put it down a little bit lower because there were were moments I was really frustrated in the romantic subplot, or the romantic main plot rather, because fated mates is a main trope in this book, but I really enjoyed the series. I was looking forward to the spin-off series we would have with two of the side characters. However, unfortunately, that book series has been put on hold as Elizabeth is fighting her health battles at the moment. I was definitely sad to hear that news, not necessarily because I am devastated that we're not going to be continuing on with the Zodiac Wolves series with some full-length spin-offs. I mean, we are going to be getting a novella collection, and that's beautiful. I'm really excited about that. I think that the Zodiac Wolves series definitely does stand on its own, and even though it does have spin-off opportunities, I'm still really happy that the series happened. I feel okay with it, but I'm just more upset that the author is going through what she is going through. I'm wishing her all the best. Elizabeth, I hope you get better, and I definitely plan to keep supporting you through this tough time. I'm pretty sure you're not watching this, but if you just so happen to be watching this, I support you, and I'm praying for you as well, and I hope you'll be okay. But anyway, sorry, it just makes me emotional to see what Elizabeth has been going through. She's just such a fighter. I just think the fact that Elizabeth wrote the Zodiac Wolves series, or the later parts of the Zodiac Wolves series, while she was going through what she was going through is just absolutely admirable. And honestly, the finale to the Zodiac Wolves series, before we get the novella collection that's eventually gonna come out, was phenomenal. And I think that Elizabeth should be proud of her work. Yeah, there were moments where I was not okay with how Caden was going about things, but overall the series was great, and I really love Ayla's journey. I felt so emotionally attached to Ayla's journey, and I am just so thankful that this story exists. I'm happy that I have the Arcane Society exclusive editions of the series, and I will continue to read more by Elizabeth Briggs in the future, and I think I'm also going to visit her backlist as well. And in spot number 20, we have Lore Olympus. Okay, so I am enjoying the continuation of Lore Olympus. It's definitely one of my favorite ongoing series. It's not perfect at the moment. I think that where we have left off at volume 5, it certainly does not feel complete as of yet, but I'm still enjoying the story as we're going along. I still connect to Persephone and the side characters, and I love Hades in this one as well, and I will continuously read this series. Overall, I just have very positive feelings about the series, and there were just moments that really made me tear up as we've proceeded. I appreciate Persephone's strength. I appreciate Eros as a very supportive friend to Persephone, and I also definitely appreciate the journey that Hades is going on as well in the background, and I am just so looking forward to seeing Hades and Persephone get together, but I am enjoying the journey before we get to the destination. So that's why I've put it on this list. And in spot number 19, we have Forged by Magic by Jenna Wolfhart. This is definitely one of the last minute favorites I had on this list, and I am so happy that I read this book this year. I really enjoyed this. This was definitely a cozy romantasy that had some high stakes, but overall just felt warm and comforting. As I was reading it, I felt like I was wrapped up in a warm blanket drinking hot cocoa, even though it's like really hot here, but I had those warm fuzzy feelings while reading it, and I also found the steamy scenes to be quite nice. Overall, I had a very fun time with this one, and I would definitely recommend this to those who are wanting a very cute, cozy romantasy that just so happens to have a little bit more higher stakes than books like Legends and Lattes. I mean, well, actually much higher stakes than Legends and Lattes, or some other cozy romances out there. I'm trying to find another comp to this because the cover is giving me Legends and Lattes vibes. I really need to read Bookshops and Bone Dust as well to see whether or not it kind of matches those stakes. But yeah, Forged by Magic is just very wholesome and romantic, but definitely has some good action in it as well. In spot number 18, we have His Darkest Craving by Tiffany Roberts. This book actually was initially lower on the list, but I think the more and more I think about this book, the more it means to me. This is probably my favorite Tiffany Roberts book I've read so far. It's not as plot driven as some of the others that I've read. I really love Escaping Wonderland. If we're talking about plot driven books that I absolutely adore by them, Escaping Wonderland I'd say is my favorite so far. But if I were to talk about a book by Tiffany Roberts that connects to me emotionally, it would be His Darkest Craving. This book is just absolutely beautiful because because we are following a protagonist who has ran away to start a new life. She's run away from her abusive ex-partner into a cabin in the woods. She decided that she wanted to live there, and in the process she finds love through this forest shadow monster who is there to comfort her and who is there to be there for her and who's there to love her and appreciate her and to protect her. I just love their dynamic so much. I love them getting to know each other, but them getting to love each other as well, and for Sophie to realize that she truly deserves much more than what she got initially. Oh, it's just such a beautiful story in my personal opinion. I just love that Sophie was able to find peace. Overall, I love this book a lot. I think because I emotionally connected with it. It was a very short book as well. I believe it's like under 200 pages, but it certainly hit me hard emotionally. I can't wait to read more by Tiffany Roberts, and I hope that I can connect to another book like this from them. And in spot number 17, we have A Court This Cruel and Lovely, the first book in the series. I read this in December as well. This was definitely one of the last minute favorites that I gained within the year. And yes, obviously at the moment the story does not feel complete because I've only read the first book where everything gets set up, but I have a feeling that this book series is going to be one of my favorite book series. I think the book series will conclude in 2024. I'm not too sure though. Don't hold me to that. It's just at the moment only 4 books are listing on Kindle Unlimited and on Goodreads. There might be a 5th book. I don't know, but I am very much looking forward to see how this book series will progress based on this first book. I love the romantic setup in this first book, and I also like the setup of the characters, the found family aspect, potentially fated mates. I'm looking forward to seeing how this is gonna go. I kind of know that there's gonna be a certain direction based on the fact that I've read romanticises similar to this before, but yeah, I can't wait for book 2 because I have a feeling that book 2 is gonna be amazing. I actually have 5-star predictions for book 2, but I really hope I don't let myself down with that. I think that the series might just be a new favorite of mine. And yes, in spot number 16, we have Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I am not including Iron Flame in this. I'm just talking about Fourth Wing. And that's so hard because I usually talk about the portions of the series I've read, but if we're not including Iron Flame, Fourth Wing ranks at number 16. However, if we were to talk about Iron Flame would not even make the list. Like, Iron Flame would drag Fourth Wing down, but I love Fourth Wing as a standalone project. Even though, obviously, I'm looking forward to seeing how the rest of the series goes, I am not necessarily the biggest fan of Iron Flame. And yes, there are moments of Iron Flame I can get on board with. Like, I'm looking forward to seeing, like, how it's going to progress from book 2, but book 2 itself just was not well paced, and it did not give me the same nostalgic feelings that Fourth Wing gave me. Fourth Wing very much reminds me of Divergent, but with dragons, and that is what I love about Fourth Wing so much. The second book, Iron Flame, did not give me any of those vibes. I was excited to see how Violet would navigate her second year, and you know what? I did enjoy the first half of the novel. It's just the moments between the 50% mark and the 75% mark, they just really did not need to be there. I don't know. And at the moment, I find it really difficult to view this series as a romantasy, considering that I feel as if the romance in this fantasy romance is very underdeveloped at this point of the story. I think that book 2 should have developed this romance way more than it did, but that is okay. Anyway, Fourth Wing itself is a great first book in a series. I understand why people are saying that it's not that well written, because you know what? I'm not gonna lie. As soon as I started it, it reminded me of Crave. It was written in a very similar writing style to how the Crave series is written. I can just say that it reminds me of that kind of young adult writing style, but it's not necessarily a young adult series, and I don't expect everyone to get on board with this book series, but a lot of people have. I mean, Fourth Wing did win the Goodreads Choice Awards for fantasy, or sorry, romantasy specifically. It has definitely taken off. Pun intended with the dragons there. Overall, I loved and adored Fourth Wing, but I did not love and adore Fourth Wing as much as I loved and adored the book I placed at spot number 15. That is constantly now compared to Fourth Wing. And that, my friends, is The Hurricane Wars by Thea Guionzon. Oh my goodness, I love this book so much. I have been screaming about this book, and the reason why it ranks low is because this book is just one book. It's only just starting the story. It's only just building the world. And you know what? This book series might just be a full-on slow burn, or we might get more relationship development in the second book. I'm hoping for the latter, but I also would not be surprised in the former if that was going to happen. I wonder if this book series is going to make us wait until the third book, until the two characters are like finally together, maybe at the very last minute. I mean, I don't know. I've read a few book series like that recently, so I would not be surprised. Those birds, man, those birds. And yes, I know that the Hurricane Wars does not give me the same nostalgic feelings as Fourth Wing has given me. However, the Hurricane Wars still feels a little bit nostalgic because it kind of reminds me of Shadow and Bone, except if the Darkling is definitely less toxic. Like, I am personally devastated that the Shadow and Bone Netflix TV series got cancelled, especially because I think it had so much potential after the second season, and I did not like the note that the second season left off on, and I did want the Six of Crows spinoff. But for the Shadow and Bone aspects that we got based on the actual initial Shadow and Bone trilogy, I was still kind of satisfied with that storyline, and reading the Hurricane Wars kind of made me experience that nostalgia as well. Overall, I really loved the story. I loved the tension and the build-up, and I'm not gonna lie, I did also enjoy the world building. I keep on hearing from people that the world building was not that great, and I actually very much enjoyed it. I don't know, there's just something about the story in particular that has stuck with me to this day. I also hear from those who have actually watched Star Wars that they don't like it because it's too much like Reylo, and I have personally not watched Star Wars. I've specifically kept away from the new trilogy because I hear that it's not that great, and I hear that it's very inconsistent in its writing. But I hear great things about Reylo, and I know that a lot of people are writing Reylo fanfics at the moment, including Ali Hazelwood, and it somehow works. And I am hearing from a few people who have actually watched Star Wars that it is too much like Reylo, and I have no opinion there because I have not watched the new Star Wars trilogy. I don't necessarily have any experience with Reylo in general, but based on reading the Love Hypothesis and then reading this series, I don't see those two couples as being the same for some reason. So essentially those two books encapsulate my experience with Reylo in general, but I definitely do have to say that I appreciate the Hurricane Wars for what it is on its own. Moving on to spot number 14, we have Ashes of the Sun by Django Wexler. This was a pleasant surprise I read this year. I actually read this for the 12 Friends Recommend Me 12 Books Challenge, and I was personally recommended this book by a fellow booktuber, Brianna. Go check their channel out. I have linked their channel down in the description. I honestly did not know what to expect from this one. I've only seen this book in bookstores before, and I've seen the audiobook length. I just knew that it was chunky. I personally did not have any expectations going into it. I was just intimidated. But then I listened to the audiobook, and I fell in love with this story almost instantly. Well, it took me a little bit of time to get into. Like, I listened to an hour of the audiobook before I was fully invested, and oh my goodness, was it good. This was a very enjoyable story. I really do need to continue on with this book series. Like, unlike Fourth Wing and the Hurricane Wars, I don't have the excuse of all the books not being out yet. I believe this trilogy has been complete. I really need to continue on with this trilogy. This first book is a very well set up first book. The relationships in this first book are established, and I just seriously love these characters so much. I cannot believe I did not continue on with this book series this year, but I do want to in the new year. I believe that the third book is out in a different format at the moment, so that's why I'm just kind of waiting to collect the physical editions. I'm just waiting for them to like all match in height before I purchase all 3 books to have in my collection. This book series is definitely worth having in my collection based on this first book, and I'm really honestly hoping that the second book does not suffer from second book syndrome and that the third book is a good finale, because this first book was just so good. I know that this first book was a lot of setup, but overall it was a very fun and enjoyable story. I mean, technically I don't need to continue on with the series in order to be satisfied, but I want to, because these characters, they still live in my mind rent-free. I need to know what happens next to them. So I am planning to reread Ashes of the Sun sometime, hopefully within the new year, if not in the future, and then continue on with the series. I also want to read more by Django Wexler in the future, because boy, did Ashes of the Sun captivate me. Thank you so much, Brianna, for recommending this to me. I could not thank you enough. This book was really good. Spot number 13, we also have a last minute favorite for the year. I read the Frost and Nectar series in December, and this book series was so good. Sia and Crawford are definitely a favorite author duo of mine. I would definitely read any book by them going forward, and Frost and Nectar was hot, it was heartwarming, it was gut-wrenching, and so much more. I think that this book series could use a few spin-offs, but you know what? I personally appreciate the way that Sia and Crawford are able to tell a good story in a concise manner. At this point of time, I've only read the Frost and Nectar series and the Demon Queen Trials by them, and even though I believe that both series have spin-off opportunities, I'm still very much satisfied with their overall plots and stories, and I would be just as happy even if they left those series and those worlds alone. I mean, yes, I would kind of like to see them build further upon the worlds that they built in those 2 series, but I will take what I can get, honestly. And Frost and Nectar was a pleasant surprise to absolutely knock my socks off at the end of this year. I actually was planning to read it in 2024, but I changed my plans last minute. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to read this duet, and I'm happy. I'm satisfied. It's really good. I would highly recommend it to those who are wanting a good, quick, and concise book series. I think that C.N. Crawford write romantic tension very well, and this is a very quick series to get through, especially if you love The Cruel Prince. I would say if you love The Cruel Prince, try The Demon Queen Trials and Frosted Nectar out. I think that both book series have elements of The Cruel Prince that I personally enjoyed that I reckon that Cruel Prince lovers would absolutely adore. So I would highly recommend those book series if you have not checked them out yet, if you are a huge fan of Holly Black. And over at spot number 12, we have Belladonna by Adeline Grace. This book means a lot to me, personally. I read this at one of the hardest times I've had to experience in recent years. I've talked about this a few times on my channel. This year, I lost a very dear friend to cancer at the age of 30. It is hard to process, but Belladonna helped me process it because the story itself is about death. Even though it is a murder mystery story that does have a romantic subplot and everything, the main love interest and kind of antagonist, not really antagonist, sorry, he's more like an anti-hero, but still kind of an antagonist in every one of our lives, is death. But I think this book comforted me so much because I was able to come to terms with the fact that death is also the end of suffering. It's also the moment where souls can find peace. Reading Belladonna comforted me at the time that I read it because I was able to process my grief thinking of death that way. It still absolutely sucks what happened to my friend. I miss her so much. I'm doing everything I can to remember her in the little things I do, especially if they're bookish, because she was a bookish friend. But overall, Belladonna was very special to me because I read it at the time that I did. We are now moving on to spots 9, 10, and 11, and the reason why I've put them together is because all three of these spots contain books by the same author. These books just so happen to be from my current favorite author of all time, and that, my friends, is Laura Falasa. So I ranked the Unearthly series at spot number 11 because I think this book series could have been shorter. I think this book series could have easily either been a quartet or a trilogy. I think that books 1 and 2 could have been combined, and I definitely think that the 3 final books in the series, with how explosive they were, could have remained in the series, and I think that's why I did not rank this book series above the other 2 books slash series that I have to recommend by Laura Falasa on this list today. But I do have to say, out of all book series that I read by Laura Falasa this year, this one might just be the most memorable, and I think that's because I read this book series in January and I read the other 2 book slash series later on in the year. I read Bewitched like sometime in the middle of the year, and then I read the Fallen World trilogy sometime later in the year. And out of all book slash series that I have to talk about today from Laura Falasa, the Unearthly series falls into the young adult slash early new adult category, upper YA, because it does get steamy towards the end. However, it also doesn't fall in the dark romance category like the other 2 books and series that I have to talk about from Laura Falasa. This one is definitely like a romantasy slash a paranormal romance, but it's not necessarily a dark romance. I think it could have taken the dark romance direction if the protagonist happened to have another love interest, but I think overall this book series might disappoint dark romance lovers and those who kind of want to see the protagonist get with the villain. I'm not the biggest fan of the love interest in this book series. I do put up with them towards the end, but I did not like them towards the beginning, and I just did not really see the chemistry. I did, however, find this book series quite fascinating because when we start the Unearthly series, we're told that Gabriella is like the only siren in existence, and honestly that's quite funny and ironic considering that Calypso, who is the protagonist of the Bargainer series, is also a siren. So potentially Calypso and Gabriella are related in some way. They just haven't met. And you know what? Also recently I made another connection between the Unearthly series and the Bargainer series. I believe that the antagonist of both series just so happened to be the same antagonist but just reincarnated, because there's a comment made in the end of the Bargainer series. I also reread the Bargainer series and I wanted to put it on this list so bad, but it technically classifies as a reread, so I did not. I really just wanted to give it a shout out because it's definitely one of my favorite series of all time, and it's one of the best series I also read this year. But there is a nod to the Unearthly series towards the end of the Bargainer series when the villain makes a comment saying, I also met a siren like you, who I also had to fight, but you know, that's where the similarities end. And that's kind of how I suspected that they might be the same antagonist, considering that they come from similar settings and they do similar things to each other. and they're both just as horrific. I think that the Unearthly series is kind of the origin story for the antagonist who we eventually face in the Bargainer series. But that is just my personal theory. I don't think that Laura would have put that line in the Bargainer series if that's not what she meant, honestly. That's just my personal opinion. I love the Unearthly series because I love how it connects to the Bargainer series. I also very much appreciate the fact that I got to see where Laura started off in her writing. I mean, technically, I don't think that the Unearthly series is the first book series that she ever wrote. However, it was her start in the Bargainer universe, and I'm so happy to see where it all started, especially because I really love this universe, and I really want to read more books that are set within this universe. Overall, I really appreciate the Unearthly series. It's not perfect. I think it could have been ranked lower on this list. However, I put it this high up because of how much the Bargainer world means to me and how much more I want to explore it and how fascinating it was to read the Unearthly series, to see how it kicked off and how this book series essentially also inspired the Bargainer series, because I love seeing those parallels. There are so many parallels to the Bargainer series in the Unearthly series, and the Unearthly series is definitely kind of discount Bargainer in my personal opinion. I'm not saying that it's terrible, but it definitely could have been improved upon, and I reckon that if a publisher agreed to pick this book series up alongside the rest of Laura Flassa's books, that Laura would also revise the Unearthly series in the way that she also revised the Bargainer series after it got picked up by a publisher. And then spot number 10 goes to the Fallen World trilogy by Laura Flassa, and I am of the personal belief that the Fallen World trilogy walked so that the Four Horsemen series and Bewitched could run. This dark romance series was a perfect start for Laura to dive further into dark romances. I mean, it might not be the first dark romance that she started off with, and as I mentioned previously, I think the Unearthly series had the potential to go into dark romance territory. It did not. However, the Fallen World trilogy did not hold back in the dark romance aspects because Montez was a very evil love interest. He was very corrupt in his love for the protagonist. And you know what? I also find this series to be quite nostalgic, kind of similar to how I feel about Fourth Wing and Divergent, because the Fallen World trilogy actually reminds me of Mockingjay, which is the third book in the Hunger Games series, because we are following a protagonist who comes from an underground bunker, kind of similar to District 13, and then we follow an antagonistic love interest who comes from a capital-like place. And it's just fascinating because it felt like I was reading Hunger Games fan fiction, but in a completely different way. It obviously had a pretty different concept from the Hunger Games because we weren't following the fight to the death or anything. However, in the Fallen World series, there just seemed to be some similar aspects to Mockingjay specifically, and I kind of really liked it. It made the reading experience a bit more immersive because I'm so familiar with the Hunger Games world. So I don't know, like I could just really picture this world looking like Paneum. That being said, it was still its own story. It was very much unique. It was unlike anything I've ever read, and it's definitely one of my favorite dark romances I've ever read. Montez and Serenity, oh my goodness, their dynamic is just so interesting. And I honestly loved and appreciated seeing Serenity's progression throughout the story and how she became stronger, because Montez was just always winning. He was so privileged, and there were moments where I just got so angry at him because, I mean, you know, he's truly the antagonist of the story, but I just love to see how everything played out. I don't know, it was just fascinating to me. This is a dark romance that I know I should not have rooted for because I don't think that Montez's behavior should have been rewarded. But the story was just fascinating overall because I can still see why Serenity fell in love with Montez, even though I think he did not deserve the love that Serenity gave him. Overall, the series was just so fascinating. I do want to get more into dark romance only because I love adrenaline-inducing reads, and the Fallen World trilogy definitely gave me that. I'm not saying it's as good as the Four Horsemen series. However, it's much fast-paced than the Four Horsemen series. This series in total, I believe, is under 1,000 pages. It's a trilogy. It's very concise. It doesn't waffle on too much. I mean, there are moments where it does get slower, particularly in the second book, but once you hit the epilogue of the second book, you might gasp the way that I gasped, because I certainly gasped books. That's why I had to put it at spot number 10. This book series was so good. I still feel a bit more fondly about the Unearthly series, and I think that's because I read the Unearthly series first thing this year. But the Fallen World series was phenomenal. It's unforgettable. It does have flaw. I do think the Fallen World series could be revised and it could be a bit more fleshed out. Honestly, because there were moments where I felt like things could have been a little bit more fleshed out and we could have gotten to know some characters and their motivations a bit better. But overall, it was a very satisfying read and I had to give it a shout out on this list. One of the most addictive reads I read this year. And yes, you guessed it, spot number 9 goes to Bewitched by Laura Falasa. This was the only single book I read from Laura Falasa that does not have a continuation yet. I'm so looking forward to Be Spelled and The Curse That Binds. I'm not too sure if that is still happening. Recently, I've seen a cover reveal for Be Spelled. I have not seen a cover reveal for The Curse That Binds, but I'm waiting on news for that one because I would love the prequel backstory for these two. I just love how Laura is progressing in writing dark romance, but also, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of felt the ick while reading it because I thought that this was gonna be just as wholesome as the Bargainer series. But it's like Laura took her writing experience from the Bargainer series, put it into this book, but also took some writing experience that she gained through writing the Four Horsemen series and the Fallen World series and put it into this book as well and combined both styles of romance together. I do like this combination. I'm a little bit nervous to see how the series is gonna go. I was a bit nervous to put this above the Unearthly series and the Fallen World series. However, in my personal opinion, this first book is much better paced and fleshed out than the individual books in the other series. I have a feeling that this series is going to be a new favorite series of mine, but I honestly do reckon it's going to be hard to beat the Bargainer series. I think that the Bewitched series is going to be close to the Bargainer in terms of favorites. If the series progresses in a way that will make it one of my favorite series of all time, I did enjoy this first book so much. I found it to be compelling and engaging, and I was just obsessed with this romantic dynamic, even though it's not the healthiest because the love interest is very similar to the Four Horsemen in a sense that he wants to conquer, but he is so in love. Yeah, it's a little bit toxic, but I can't help but be invested. Bewitched, similarly to the Fallen World series and the Four Horsemen series, was an adrenaline-inducing read, and I can't wait to read more from Laura in this series. And I honestly think my reasoning for why I put it at spot number 9 and I put the other two at spots 11 and 10 is kind of justified. But I reckon that as the rest of the series comes out, this series has potential to make it higher on future lists. And my spot number 8 pick goes to A Taste of Poison by Tessandra Odette. This is the 4th book in the Entangled with Fae series. I actually did not read the rest of the Entangled with Fae series, or at least like the final book, A Dream So Wicked. I love this series so much. However, I did personally take a break from the series because I did not like the 3rd book that much. I just felt like the 3rd book felt a little bit uninspired. When you bring a talent show into the mix, I don't know, it just really did not feel as magical as the rest of the series. It just kind of felt a little bit forced. But A Taste of Poison brought all the magic back into the series, in my personal opinion. And look, I'm not a huge Snow White fan. Snow White has never been like my favorite fairy tale, but A Taste of Poison is one of those series that made me reconsider that because I love Tessandra Odette's twist on the Snow White fairy tale, especially in this book. I thought that I knew everything that was gonna happen, but this book took a complete 180. The plot twist absolutely shocked me, but also the characters were quite lovable. I fell in love with these characters from the very beginning. I had become obsessed with them. I still think about these characters to this day. I really want to go back and reread this book because I just found it to be absolutely comforting and engaging. And overall, I think it's a beautiful standalone, and I would recommend it to those who are wanting a great fairy tale that's not predictable, but also is quite comforting and has a very healthy romantic dynamic and a good found family aspect to it as well. This book just made me so happy. Thinking about this book has lifted my spirits as I'm speaking right now. I did not think that this book would be above what I've read from Laura Falasa this year, but it made me that happy that I had to place it at spot number 8 on this list, so that's what I did. So if you, like myself, struggle to get through Kiss of the Selkie, I would highly encourage you to continue on with the series by reading A Taste of Poison. I seriously cannot wait to read A Dream So Wicked, but I just had a lot to read towards the end of the year, so that's why I did not do it, but I cannot wait to finally finish the series in the new year because it's just that good. And in spot number 7, we have The Demon Queen Trials by C. Ann Crawford. Once again, C. Ann Crawford really showed up this year for me. specifically. I had previously heard of the Demon Queen trials a while back, I'd say 2 years ago. Like initially I wasn't necessarily intrigued in the covers, but everyone was absolutely screaming about how good this book series was. And so I told myself that this year I would binge read it, especially because I purchased the Fake Rate exclusive editions, because I definitely prefer the Fake Rate exclusive covers. I don't know, I just wasn't necessarily a big fan of the KU covers. But then when I saw the Fake Rate ones, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna purchase these. Just like I purchased the Frost and Nectar set. When I see some beautiful character art, I will immediately be tempted to purchase it. And what I like about Fake Rate specifically is that they really prioritize putting fan art on covers. And that's why I like their special editions personally. Not everyone loves Fake Rate exclusive editions, but I kind of really like them. Majority of the time. I don't know if I've seen a Fake Rate exclusive edition that I have not liked yet. So I purchased the Fake Rate box set. I told myself I was gonna read the series this year. I did, and I ended up binging it within like 48 hours. I was so addicted to the Demon Queen trials, and I think it is the closest series I've read to The Cruel Prince, in a sense that the hate to love dynamic is spread throughout the series. Like Rowan and Orion don't get with each other so easily. They despise each other, but they're also infatuated with each other. It was so addictive to read about. I honestly think that if Frost and Nectar was a trilogy, it would have been closer to the ranking of the Demon Queen trials, because as much as I did enjoy Frost and Nectar, I think the reason why I did not love it as much as the Demon Queen trials is because I spent more time with Rowan and Orion. I had more time to attach myself to them, and the hate to love slow burn felt much longer because it was a longer series. It really stood out to me this year. And you know what's actually quite interesting? As soon as I finished the Demon Queen trials, I thought to myself, yeah, this reading year is gonna be a good reading year. I don't know why I specifically felt that way as soon as I finished the Demon Queen trials, but that's immediately what I thought. Every single time I think of how great this reading year was, I will instantly go back to thinking about how I felt after reading the Demon Queen trials. It was so good. I highly recommend the series to everyone who is wanting a very good, concise paranormal series. Spot number 6 goes to the Bonds That Tie series by J. Bree. I don't know why I put it so high on this list. Yeah, I do. It was addictive. It took over my life. And honestly, I would be doing the Demon Queen trials a disservice if I did not rank it high, like around the Bonds That Tie, because I appreciated the plot and the pacing of the Demon Queen trials. And I literally started reading it like a couple of weeks after reading the Bonds That Tie. However, the Bonds That Tie gave me like the worst book hangover, but it was just so addictive. Like, yeah, it's not the best written series. I think that it could have been better paced. And you know what? I don't stan every single one of the characters. I do, however, adore North and Griffin, and I love Ollie. I loved following Ollie. Ollie is definitely one of my favorite characters of this year. I do appreciate the overall story. My reading experience with Tragic Bonds, I don't think could be matched. It broke my heart so much. I remember crying a waterfall while reading Tragic Bonds. It was just so tragic. I mean, pun intended, right? It's not a perfect series, but I'd say if we're talking about reading experiences here, it ranks at number 6. Like, the fact that I put The Bonds That Tie over all of Laura Flass's works this year, that honestly baffles me. I mean, I'm not gonna put it on top of my reading experience of The Bargainer. That's because I'm not talking about rereads. I'm actually talking about books and series that I read for the first time this year. Spot number 6 is where I would have to rank it. I still love Laura Flass's works, and I don't think based on this list that I'm saying that Laura is definitely not one of my favorite authors of all time. Laura definitely is. I think I can already say that this is definitely one of my favorite series. It's definitely a guilty pleasure series. It's not for everyone. It is a dark romance. I would not recommend this series if you were just looking for a wholesome romantasy. There are wholesome moments, but it does deal with some very heavy subject matters. I would proceed with caution if I were you. In spot number 5, we have the final standalone I have to mention for this video today. Everything else will be a series. And guys, that is A Soul to Keep by Opal Rain. This, once again, was a last-minute surprise that just came my way in December, or technically I actually started it in November. I specifically started it in November because I at least wanted to start it before getting the Fake Rate exclusive edition set, and I did. And I'm so happy that I've secured a set, but not only that, I secured a signed set. They had to restock because the demand for the series was so high. I did not know that this was a very universally loved series, but I can see why that is the case now, because Assault to Keep is genuinely an amazing book. I love this first book so much, and I cannot wait to continue on with the series. I have very high expectations for the rest of the books as well. I hear that Rhea and Orpheus's story, however, is one that is absolutely memorable, and it's definitely one of the best in the series, so I'm kind of nervous about going into the rest. I don't know if I'm going to be attached to the other characters like I am attached to Rhea and Orpheus, but I believe we have met the love interest in the second book already in book 1, so I cannot wait to follow his story. Overall, this was a pleasant surprise. This book makes me so happy, it makes me so giddy, and Abby over at Abby Lisi, the book lover, keeps on going on about the fact that it's one of the best books that she's read this year, and I'm so happy for her. I know Abby will probably be thinking, what, why isn't it your favorite book of the year? I find it really difficult to give standalones that kind of praise because I get more attached to series. However, the fact that Assault to Keep made it so high up on this list says a lot, because I usually prefer series over standalones. It's definitely one of the best books I've read this year, and definitely my favorite standalone I've read this year. I just kind of wish that Rhea and Orpheus's story was a little bit longer. Maybe I could bump it up, but I just spent so much more time with the other characters in the other book series that I'm going to be talking about in my top 4. That is pretty much the reason why Assault to Keep has not topped them. However, it definitely comes close, and this reading experience was just so fun, and it was just so heartwarming as well. If you are looking for a very wholesome monster romance, read Assault to Keep. You'll thank us later. When I say us, I mean myself and Abby, because I can't take full credit for it. Abby, I give her the credit, because honestly, she deserves. Thank you so much for recommending this book, Abby. Even though I was gonna read it anyway regardless, I still think I have Abby to thank for bumping it up on my TBR and convincing me to read it sooner. Spots 2, 3, and 4 were really hard for me to decide upon. These 3 series are like my ultimate favorite series of the year before my ultimate favorite series of the year, which is number 1. Like, number 1, I believe, cannot be topped by the rest of the series that I've listed. It's so difficult. I tried to narrow it down based on overall satisfaction, but that's so hard. Okay, so I've placed the Dark Court Rising series at spot number 4. I was highly considering making this book series my second, but then I read the book series that I put in spot number 3, and it was really difficult for me to decide between spots 2, 3, and 4. I keep on going back and forth. I would kind of hold them up to the same level in terms of enjoyment and attachment, because overall, I feel as if this is definitely one of the most healthy romantic dynamics I read about this year. I've said this before, I will say this again. The devil works hard, but Tiago works harder. The fact that he fought for this relationship and he fought for freedom is honestly just admirable. And I love Iskvian's journey to coming into our power, to coming into our own and learning independence. I love it so much. Tiago and Iskvian are just precious. They mean so much to me. And I think the reason why I ultimately chose this book series to be spot number 4 is because as much as I appreciated the finale, I really feel as if the story isn't over yet. I mean, I know that the author technically did tease a spin-off, especially after the events of the final book, like with the epilogue and stuff, and with some of the characters' stories being kind of open. I'm curious to see how that will go eventually. There are a few unanswered questions that the finale left me with, so that is the general vibe. That is how I feel, and that is why I specifically chose this book series to be my 4th place. I honestly reckon that if the finale tied things up a bit neater, it could have potentially been spot number 2 or 3, but I do like my spot number 2, even though I feel like my spot number 2 is not as well written as spot number 4. I've placed the Dark Court Rising series in spot number 4 for those reasons. And spot number 3 goes to the Savage Land series by Stacey Marie Brown. And you know what? I do think that this series had the potential to be my favorite series. It's definitely my favorite dark romance I've read in a very long time. It's my favorite dark romance series of the year. It even beat The Bonds That Tie. And honestly, I think that it's much better paced and well fleshed out than The Bonds That Tie series. I do think that book number 5 could have been condensed, or we could have had a little bit more perspective in book number 5. I mean, as much as I love and adore Brexley as a main character, I honestly reckon that book number 5 is when we needed to expand the POVs. I love that book number 6, we have all sorts of POVs. However, I do believe that that could have started somewhere halfway through the series or sometime later on, like book number 5. Overall, this book series gave me a lot of adrenaline. I mean, book series number 1 also gave me a lot of adrenaline, but this gave me some really good, intense adrenaline, and it really helped me get back into reading after I had experienced my loss this year. It was definitely what I needed at the time. I had become so obsessed with the Savage Land series. I devoured this 6-book series within 48 hours. Yes, very similar to the Bonds That Tie series and the Demon Queen Trials and a few other series that I've mentioned on this list. I know that a book series is really good if I devour the book series because I'm enjoying it a lot. I mean, sometimes I could just rush read a series because, you know, I'm just trying to get through it and I just want to get it out of the way. But that was not the case for Savage Lands at all. And I'm so thankful that I really enjoyed this book series. And yes, at times the relationships in here were toxic, but I mean, it was a dark romance, so that was to be expected. However, that kind of also added an addictive quality to this book series, and also a lot of explosions. I do think that the characters could have communicated much better in this book series, but overall, I had a very good time. I do see myself rereading this series sometime in the future, and I cannot wait to read the spin-offs in this series as well. Stacey Marie Brown is definitely a new favorite author of mine. I definitely need to read more books in this series and in this universe. So Savage Lands made it to spot number 3, which means that the Deliciously Dark Fairy Tale series made it to spot number 2. This series holds a very special place in my heart. I think out of my top 3, this book series was definitely less adrenaline inducing, but it was just more fun. The Deliciously Dark Fairy Tale series took me a week to read, but I was enjoying every moment of it. Well, I mean, I was a bit uncertain about it when I first started it. I was like, okay, this is interesting. I mean, it's good setup, but not great. And then I proceeded with the series, and oh my goodness, it got so good from A Throne of Ruin. I love A Throne of Ruin. I love the rest of the series as well. Even though book number 4 is a captivity book where they're spending majority of the book in prison, it was less depressing. And you know what? There are 2 books in the Savage Land series where we are spending majority of the books in captivity as well. And as much as I enjoyed the Savage Land series, the reason why I placed the Deliciously Dark Fairy Tale series above the Savage Land series is because I truly think that for a captivity book, book number 3 topped the 2 other captivity books in Savage Lands. I felt so happy while reading the series. It was just so fun. It was hilarious. And I'm also so happy that 2023 just so happened to be the year that I met KF Brain. I gushed to her about the series and how much this book series means to me. There are some dark moments in this series. This series gets really dark, but the fact that the characters in this book series are able to make jokes throughout it, I don't know, it just seemed very comforting. I don't really remember what I was going through at the time that I was reading this series, but what I do know is that this book series really brightened my day, my week, my life, and I'm so happy that I found a Beauty and the Beast reimagining that I truly love and adore, because whenever I think about Beauty and the Beast reimaginings in fiction, I often think about the ones that I'm not a fan of, like ACOTAR, specifically the first book of the ACOTAR series, or like, you know, the second book in the series as well, because the Beauty and the Beast portion of the Court of Thorns and Roses series is the negative portion of the series. The Hades and Persephone portion of the series is the part of the series that everyone roots for. That's what they come for. Some people skip ACOTAR because they only really care about Akamath and Onward, and you know, I totally get it. And then there's the Cursebreaker series where Prince Ren is a terrible beast character. But then we have the Deliciously Dark Fairy Tale series where Nightthane is just so refreshing, and you can see why he's losing hope. He spent so much time trying to make things right for his kingdom. You can totally see why he's a beast-like character, but also the fact that he is driven by love for the people around him and for Finley. It was just so beautiful to see. He's definitely one of the best beast characters I've ever seen. The Deliciously Dark Fairy Tale series is one I will reread in the future. This book series was my favorite until book series number 1 came in. I will be rereading the Deliciously Dark Fairy Tale series for laughs, but if I want to be truly motivated and inspired, I will read The War of Lost Hearts by Carissa Broadbent. This book series is my number 1 pick. I have talked about this a lot on my channel ever since I finished reading it. So recently I made an observation. I used to read a lot of comic books and I used to watch a lot of superhero movies because I found that after consuming that kind of media, I would feel inspired. I would feel driven. I would find compassion and empathy for the people around me, and I would be driven to find my purpose in life and to serve others. For some reason, that's the message message that I would take out of superhero films. Like, whenever I think about that, I think of like Spider-Man Homecoming or Thor Ragnarok, you know, when they finally come to the realization that they do this for others, not necessarily for themselves or for their own glory. That's why I really loved Marvel movies and Marvel comics. I was so obsessed with the hero's journey. I've recently now dived into the villain's journey by reading a bunch of dark romance and reading a lot more than I'm actually consuming superhero media. But I recently read the War of Lost Hearts series, and I think the War of Lost Hearts series gave me that feeling again. Except the War of Lost Hearts series feels very real because this book series deals with a very heavy subject matter, and that is slavery. So in the first book, Daughter of No Worlds, we follow our protagonist who has recently made her way / survived her way out of slavery. Man, this book series is really confronting. But as soon as she gets out of that place, it's her life's mission to free slaves from their captivity. And it's so beautiful to see that she's driven by that. But it is so unfortunate that Titania lives in a society where the government is corrupt. And what I appreciate about the series is that, you know, it could be unrealistic. Everyone could be free from their captivity. Things could come easily to the protagonist. But you know what? Carissa Broadbent decided to make this book series absolutely realistic and heartbreaking. And it's so beautiful. The way that Carissa wrote Titania, and she wrote Maxentarius in this book series, and she even wrote Aether, was so magnificent. I seriously tear up about these characters a lot, and the reason why I do is because they feel so real to me, because this book series feels so real to me. And then you have Maxentarius, who has a very tragic past, and he doesn't want to talk about it, and he doesn't want to open up to anyone. And then Titania has been assigned to him to be his apprentice, and he doesn't want to train her, so he's like grumpy and she's sunshine and stuff. But he eventually opens up to her and gets to know her and loves her. And you know what? Like, it doesn't come that easily, no. This book series is full of heartbreak. It was so hard to read at times. And you know what? I do have to say this. The third book could have been shorter. It could have been condensed. I loved the second book so much. The second book in the series is probably the best sequel I've ever read in my entire life. The Children of Fallen Gods, oh my goodness. Best sequel I've read in my entire life. I can't say the same thing about the finale being the best finale I read in my entire life. I would give that to Dark Harmony in the Bargainer series, but this book series impacted me so much. And I'll be honest here, if I was to choose any series to be my comfort read, it would be the Bargainer series. But if I were to choose any of these series to be motivated, to be impacted, to be driven, but to also experience a story that will tear me apart but put me back together again, it would probably be the War of Lost Hearts series. This is a book series I would recommend to anyone. I don't care if you don't read romantasy. I honestly would not classify this as a romantasy. I mean, it is a fantasy romance, but first and foremost, it is a fantasy story that deals with such heavy real life topics and issues. It's a really important read. If you are into high fantasy, I would recommend this book series. Yes, it is slow at times. And no, this book series is not convenient. Yes, there is magic in this book series. There's a magic system going on, but it's not like any typical fae romance that you would read, like in ACOTAR or something like that. There are fae in this book series that get introduced eventually, but it doesn't feel fairy tale-esque. Yeah, that's the word. This book series, while it's a fantasy romance, it is definitely not a fairy tale. It definitely does not treat itself like a fairy tale. No, this one feels real and raw, but it's one I truly appreciate. I think this book series gives me the same amount of adrenaline as a good hero's journey would. I've loved so many characters this year from the books that I've read this year, but if there's any hero or group of heroes I wanted to succeed this year, it would be the group of heroes from the War of Lost Hearts. I even thought that the title War of Lost Hearts was gonna be something romantic. No, the Lost Hearts are the people that the society has lost from slavery. That hit hard. All of this hit hard. It makes me so emotional thinking about it because this is a real life thing. It's a real life issue around the world. I think it hits harder right now with what's going on right now and what I, you know, addressed. Even though I tend to read for escapism, I am kind of happy that this book series gave me a reality check. And I know that's not everyone's thing, but trust me. This book series is amazing. You can tell that the author put their heart and soul into it, and that is why I will continue to read Carissa Broadbent going forward. I can't wait to read Serpent in the Wings of Night. And you know what? I actually specifically chose not to read Serpent this year, and here's the reason why. I wanted this book series to be my number one. I wanted to spotlight this book series because I don't want it to be overshadowed by something that could potentially make my favorite. But this right here is what in church we would call a sailor moment. The War of Lost Hearts is a book series where you need to stop and think about it. You need to sailor. This book series is a sailor book series for me. It's a stop and think about it. I could have read so many other book series that I think could have topped this book series. And you know what? I don't know about Serpent, honestly. Like, Serpent could, based on the fact that, you know, everyone's talking about it, but I specifically decided not to read Serpent and the Wings of Night because the hype is much bigger for it, yes, but I specifically wanted to take the time to ponder this book series. I wanted this book series to take the spotlight this year because I reckon it is the most fitting for the year of 2023. So I guess that's it. That's my top 23. You might have not been able to tell, but I have been filming this video in segments because it's hot today, so I've just been breaking it up. I purposely kept the chair here. It's like really difficult to film while you've got to seal everything off and not turn on the fan. But I mean, that's Australian summer. 2023 was a phenomenal reading year. I know I mentioned that earlier on in this video, but I'll mention that again. And I want to thank every one of you for sticking by me this year. I really had a fun time making content, and I will continue to make content as long as time permits it. And overall, I'm just really happy that I discovered some new favorite book series this year. All these books were incredible, and I cannot wait to share more and more favorite books in series to you guys, to recommend them in the future. I can't wait to reread some of these, and I cannot wait to share some new content ideas in the new year, so stay tuned for that. This is definitely like my favorite video of the year. I love counting down so bad, so I'm so happy that you stuck with me. And if you happen to stay to the end of the video, leave me the book stack emoji because that was a lot of books. If you happen to enjoy this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet already. Join the amazing community of book lovers. And also, I have social medias. I'm at gswizzlebooks on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm also Goodreads. That's www.goodreads.com/gswizzle. And finally, I'm at TikTok. I'm at gswizzle on TikTok if you want to follow me there for some bookish content. My camera's just about to die. Okay, I love you book lovers, and I will see you later. Peace.
Started out with half and I flipped it in a double. Started out with half and I flipped it in a double.